Talking about banking sector, disinvestment is one of the major topics of discussion nowadays, though it comes with a mixed opinion. On the one hand, it considered necessary for better functioning of our public sector undertakings, but on the other hand, puts the PSU under a lot of financial strain, needing merger or closure as a solution. In the light of this statement, what is your opinion on the privatization of banks?
I think we need to distinguish between public sector undertakings and public sector banks.
Yes.
So we have to be, the business of government is not to be in business. They are not particularly good at running business.
Yes.
And like Air India, huge sink for taxpayers' money, continuously making losses. The reason is that there is all kind of intervention and non-commercial kind of decision making, which hurts the organization, excessive social objectives, employment, etc. So it's much better to privatize, and that means no interference in the commercial decision making. Yeah.
Yes.
And also, because of the growth path we followed, the government has huge assets, but they're all underutilized. They're non-performing. They don't make money when they could, So, and part of better governance is to restructure towards providing health, nutrition, environment, public goods.
Public goods.
So, I think this disinvestment has to be done in a better manner so that it releases the real value in these assets.
True.
I think that's one reason, and they are actively doing that now because they're getting a lot of expert advice on how to do it. Equity markets are thriving. So, the disinvestment has to be such that there is no interference. And then private investors are more confident. If they think it continues to be a public sector organization, they just have a small share, it's not going to do well. But this is for public sector enterprises per se. But when you come to public sector banks, there I think the arguments you were making about the costs of privatization, because we've seen a lot of problems in Yes Bank and ICICI Bank, private sector banks also.
Yes.
And India, our credit deposit ratios are very low. We need to large expansion in banking. So, and then, when credit growth was very slow last decade, say after the 2014 asset quality review, I was talking to some Bank of America person, and I was saying that, why don't you lend? What is stopping you from lending? You don't have NPAs. No, it's always the public sector banks that take the lead in development. So private sector banks only do retail lending, very safe lending. They will not lend for infrastructure or creating national assets or Jan Dhan Yojana inclusion, all that. And apart from that, I think that the financial sector has inherent risks and instability, especially because people think the same and they move in a herd and asset prices get distorted and it crashes. So it's better to have a diversified financial sector. Public sector banks with different objectives. But at the same time, the reform so that there is no day-to-day interference in commercial decisions. And I think we are seeing that because I was on a bank board for some time just to understand. And I saw that there is very little interference and banks are being restructured to take commercial risk-based decisions. And so, look at this credit warranty, one of the schemes given in this after COVID. They are carefully assessing the risk. It's risk-based lending. Only firms that are likely to be able to repay in the future. So it's not just that you are giving money and it's a sort of loan mela, which used to happen earlier. And there is no and at the same time, government has said it will bear the risk. So you're seeing banks like Kotak doing this lending. That is the way to move in the future, that you provide transparent subsidies, then you let that person take decisions. For public sector banks, they used to say this corruption issue, the investigation by CAG, because after the NPAs and all this lending to Kingfisher, a lot of investigation, that made bankers really afraid to lend. But even that has been resolved because there's been some modification in the Prevention of Corruption Act. So that only if you have disproportionate assets can you be investing, not just if you take a commercial decision which goes wrong. There is a risk in every commercial decision. So that fear factor also, I think there's enough reform, and it's good to have banks with this, who don't have the same objectives as a private sector bank, but are left to make their own decisions without interference. So I personally don't think there's a case for large-scale privatization of public sector banks, but improve their functioning, governance, maybe merger for the very big ones. Yeah.
Yes.
But at the same time, government must monetize its assets, make sure it, either earns from them or sells them and uses that money for other objectives where it's more public goods involved.
Because these are idle resources, we can use it for better
idle or underutilized, where the value is
yes.
not released. It's a lot of land is like that.
Yes.